YouTube clip, YouTube thumbnail. You have to have your mouth open, and you have to have big text. We have the book. It arrived. And guess what? That's what we're talking about today.
Where's the ribbon at? Like, is it just at a default position, or did you actually?
I have moved it. I don't remember what I moved it to. I think just the start of a chapter. Rules. Oh yeah, our favorite art. It's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
Werewolf just leaping at some unsuspecting person in the streetlight.
The book would be mirrored.
Yeah, everything's mirrored.
Seller.
We can mirror it for a thumbnail.
I can also just mirror us back here right now.
Flower. It's flower. Flower ew. Flower ew. That's the name of our campaign. It's Flower ew.
It's a choice, I suppose.
It's transform.
There we are.
Flip horizontal. Oh god, everything changed. Everything changed when the thing was mirrored. Thumbnail.
There, fine. Thumbnail.
Gotta do it.
I'm on the wrong side.
I know, it's confusing. Flip it back.
What is this? I wonder, there must be a way to make it so that it looks right for us, but
I think that's in like previews or whatever.
Whatever. Anyway. We'll just return to being weird.
Yep.
We got the shot! Folks, we are a week away from being able to throw down on at least session 0 of our Werewolf the Apocalypse campaign. The title we are currently actively debating.
Yeah.
That's going to be on Sunday that we're going to have a look at that. So today, we're doing a clinic hours where, in and among your other questions about role-playing, we are going to look at some stuff about Werewolf the Apocalypse 5th edition specifically. But that's not to say that you can't throw any other questions you want in chat. Don't forget, you can always put an exclamation mark, the letter Q, and a space, and then it will show up in our queue here. So. I look so much like a generic TV doctor right now.
Cast him.
I mean, I guess if you want generic.
It seems like, for an ad, TV ad. 9 out of 10 doctors recommend soda. Unbranded beverage.
I'm nothing if not generic, that is true. We have been through our own kind of internal session -1, where we discuss what we're going to be doing, because while normally you're doing things like creating characters in session 0, we prefer to now do that before we hit stream. So we will do a session 0, which will cover the session 0 topics on stream, but we've been doing it kind of off stream. We've been going through the book, through the rules, developing backstories and all that. Today's not the day to get into the campaign. Today is the day to get into impressions, questions, and impressions of what this game is. Dio, I would like to say that it's actually my sister who's the evil twin, but that is not possible.
If you ever met his sister, you would know that's not possible.
So I am the evil twin by default.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you to lower the music a bit for our ear holes? I feel like you're so used to the tracks that they don't distract you, but for me, it's too much boppage. I can't focus on anything but bopping.
I'm a twin.
Yeah.
It is true.
Ooh, hello, Les.
Okay. Kate's got the not a lab coat look going too.
I mean, it is a lab coat, but
We've got a lot of things that we pulled from our Discord, just from the start. I'm conscientious enough to throw doubt on my sister. My sister is doubt-proof. It's scary. But we're gonna pull some questions from Discord to start. Please, by all means, throw whatever you want in there. We're interested in your opinions. And don't forget, you don't have to stick to Werewolf for this. It's just kind of what we have right now. One thing that I can start off with is what themes of Werewolf, and to an extent the World of Darkness, are you interested to explore that you didn't get to explore with Changeling? Werewolf has, as a game, a much more warlike attitude. Changeling, there's absolutely the possibility of introducing combat, war, the idea of conflict and all that. However, it's baked into the very DNA of Werewolf the Apocalypse. The idea that we are fighting for a specific cause, and that fight is costing us. That fight is not agreed upon by all the combatants. Even though we all ostensibly want the same thing, we absolutely don't go about doing that in the same way. And we also have to deal with our own foibles in order to accomplish our goal, which often we cannot. In some ways, the Guru's greatest enemy are themselves. So that's an interesting thing. In Changeling, I feel like there's much more open-ended in that way of how you want to look at things. But in Werewolf, there's very much a, we have this driving need to get shit done, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, specifically the concept of rage, having this boiling rage, constantly trying to keep it under the surface, which you don't always succeed at. That's really interesting to me as someone who tends to be pretty conflict averse, to dive into that. And because it's such a core concept of this version, and the way I feel in this version, the way they've represented rage in the rage dice, that when you fail, you reduce rage. It means that you experience a little bit of catharsis in actually, like, by using your gifts, by doing certain things that require a rage check. If you fail the check and lose rage, it's that you're like, great, I am making progress towards my goal. I went into my war form. It's like, yeah, fuck this, I'm less mad because I know I'm going to be more effective. So I'm finding that just the aspect of, like, the whole Hulk, I'm always angry, but trying to think about how to be someone who is there. Always has it boiling underneath.
I mean, there's plenty of things that I'm still looking forward to. In terms of themes, there's also just the idea that to let players let loose on a different kind of outlook and on a different kind of life. We've ostensibly decided on our Chronicle tenants as well. Mm-hmm. One of the mechanics that we have available in Werewolf 5th edition is that every Chronicle is supposed to select 3 tenets, ideas that the players will have to grapple with as they continue forward, presented as rules that the characters can break, but if they do, they risk accumulating Hoglosk, which is the one of the 2 potentially character-ending stats. So the concept of, is one of the things, respect your elders. Is that a tenet? Is it the opposite? Is it, never do anything the elders tell you? These are questions that we'll, of course, answer on Sunday, but that's something that I like, is that this game very specifically says, how do you want to play? Mm-hmm. And we'll be able to sort of figure that out, because as much as Werewolf always has this looming threat of apocalypse, or in this case, the looming reality of apocalypse, that doesn't mean that there isn't room for other kinds of stories in this universe. It's just they have a backdrop of the supernatural, of war, and of the ever-present threat, I think is what we're going on for.
Yeah, it's neat that they have a system in place to sort of make the rules of your version of this universe, the rules that your table will work by, and it helps to create, or at least I felt when we made ours, is that it helps to sort of further solidify how your group of characters, the sort of rules that you work by, that at some point you may end up breaking, because there are conditions that happen if you break them. They're not just unbreakable rules. You can, with a consequence.
Yeah. Ardrick points out, though the book points out that losing rage to failing rage checks doesn't mean you're less angry, but that you're sort of converting the supernatural anger into fuel for your powers and abilities. I sort of feel like it's more like, it's not that you're necessarily less angry, but more that you are channeling that rage.
Yeah, you're channeling it into something useful rather than it just being bottled up. That's sort of why I feel like I think of it as sort of catharsis, in that you're, rather than just being like, oh, I'm so pissed. It's like, okay, well, I'm pissed, but I'm gonna fucking do something with it.
Yeah, it's not a reflection of your mood. Overall, it's a reflection of your ability to take this rage inside you and do something with it. We have another question coming up from Reading Aloud. If we weren't streaming RPGs, would this tabletop role-playing game attract you as much?
I mean, if we weren't streaming at all, I feel like there are a few more games that would end up being in our stack, but so far so good. I think I would. I find it appealing. I just don't know whether there would be a broader horizon of things we'd look at, because we wouldn't have to worry about, being slow figuring out the crunch or certain, themes that we don't really want to deal with on stream that we'd be happy to deal with amongst the four of us. But yeah, I think I'd still enjoy this off stream.
One of the things that the book actually points out, and it's something that I'm very pleased to see in a book itself, which I'm really kind of happy. In the appendix for Advice for Considerate Play, which is Appendix 3, they have a listing called The Context of Play, which says you can play Werewolf in many different contexts. You can play at home with your friends, on a stream in public, or at a convention with strangers. It's a good idea to consider how the differences in who you play with and where affect the themes you explore in the game. And they go on to talk about how one of them is community. How does the way we play affect our relationships and role in our community? In the case of Private Chronicles played in someone's living room, the community aspect is small. If our play happens in public, possible problems it can cause with our communities become more important as a consideration. And this is something that we've touched upon in the past. It's the reason why, for instance, I have ruled out Scion as a game that I want to run online, because I feel like Scion, while still a game that I think people can enjoy, and it's not inherently problematic, the fact that we're streaming to a community means that we have to be far more vigilant about the way that we portray certain gods, pantheons, real-world situations, which I'm not comfortable putting in that work for a stream that is, in fact, our hobby, really, more than anything else, right? We're not about to start hiring a lot of consultants to make sure that we're doing things correctly. Again, not because we don't think that consultants aren't a good idea, but it's just we don't have the resources or the time. So, in point of fact, there are other games that I'd absolutely want to try out if it wasn't for the fact that we were streaming them. But Werewolf is already a game that I've been looking forward to for years. I really am looking forward to playing this, and whether we were on stream or not, I think we would be playing this game. Thank you, Orangeo, by the way.
Yeah, thanks for the
Alele
reason.
Ugaro is very, very telling. Ardrick asks, have there been any topics that you've debated whether they're more appropriate as a line or veil versus a chronicle tenant? For example, one of my players does not want our PCs randomly killing innocent people, and I'm debating whether that's better as a line or as a tenant, and we'll discuss in our session 02. I have a definitive answer for this, which is kind of strange, but I really do. That's a line or a veil. A tenant is something that you want the players to wrestle with as an idea of like, should I do this or should I not do this? Because you want players to put their characters in a position where they have to make these dramatic choices because that's interesting story-wise.
It's something that they do 90% of the time or 95% of the time, but there is a chance that they will break it. And if that is a line for your player, it is a line. It's not a tenant. Because then your player is going to be upset when a character breaks it.
Yeah.
Or there's no point in it being a tenant because you'll never break it.
As Flower of August just pointed out, tenants are meant to be broken. I don't think it's necessarily that it's like they're absolutely like, we're putting on here because we know we're going to break them. But it's more like we're putting them up here because we want to consider whether we should break them. But if a player is genuinely uninterested in seeing something in a game or actively against it, that becomes a line or a veil. That's a safety issue, and obviously we super support the idea that players have lines and veils. I think every game should have lines and veils. So in that particular case, I would put it as a tenant if your player was like, look, I just don't want us to default to doing this, But if it's an interesting thing that we might grapple with, great. But if it's a player who's genuinely like, I would be disturbed if we started doing this for fun, that can be described as a liner of ill. Because I can totally see some player groups just being like, I'm going to have fun with my werewolf just like going on a rampage. And maybe that's cathartic for that player.
Yeah.
But I can see another player being like, I feel really uncomfortable if we're just okay with killing people for fun.
Though I will say specifically, that's something that we discussed a lot, because it is a thing when you frenzy, if there are innocent people around, if you knock down all the baddies and you keep frenzying, then you're at risk of hitting an innocent. So that's something that you'll probably want to dig really deep into with that player, because figure out whether it's just a situation where they're reminded like how to avoid going into frenzy, which means you drop out of Krynos, things like that. I know it's something that we discussed. I know we're going to get into it more during our session 0, but we did talk about. To me, it was like capital I innocence, which is like children, pets, things like that are truly completely innocent. But your friend, who's the barista was our example, like someone who makes coffee that's your friend. Yeah, she's innocent. She's literally just there because you were ordering coffee. But she's an adult. There's like a different kind of tier of innocent. So that's also something you might be able to feel out with your player. Like whether this is a list of things that we will never do for safety. But, random teenagers hanging out on the street? No. Random adults hanging out on the street? Yes, right? Like maybe you can negotiate that, maybe you can't for your safety. But that's sort of where we landed, is like we aren't going to be killing kids.
No.
We're literally going to avoid being near children throughout the plot, just to keep it safe.
Ospot says, tenants are only exciting if you're near them, so grappling with them becomes relevant in the game. Lines are not fun when you're near them. I would say it's in general, this is a good statement. There are definitely times where a line is like, look, I just don't want to go there, but it's okay if we go close. The idea of something like someone saying, I don't want sex to be a topic in the game, but I would like to have love and romance as a topic in the game. Like, you could argue that those can be close at times. But tenets are a way to not only have that sort of like, oh, are we going to break them or not, but it can also be a way to guide the storyteller and the players in sort of the directions that you want to go in and the things that you want to explore, themes that you're interested in. If a tenet never comes up, I would agree that can be unexciting, but it can also mean that it is successfully guided the group to where they want to be. I've already said that my goal with the tenets is to reevaluate them. I don't want to set them in stone. If we find that a tenet that we've chosen is never applicable, or that it's too applicable, we may end up changing them, because there's no point in latching onto something because it's what we chose at the beginning if it's not fun. Yeah, and that even might be as simple as rephrasing from like, I'll never listen to the elders can turn to always doubt the elders or something, right? You can find a way to adjust something you've done if that's more what you actually, find ways, adjust as you need. Reading aloud, Mistrich asks, Werewolf's your favorite World of Darkness, if I recall correctly, right, John? A complicated question. It was my favorite LARP that I played in. I never actually really played in many Changeling LARPs. I ran them. Werewolf was the kind of LARP alongside Vampire that I played the most, and it was my favorite of those. The weird thing, though, is I played Werewolf back in the 90s and the 2000s. I'm a different player now. The game has changed fundamentally. And I think that the changes are for the better. But I'm not able to say if it's my favorite World of Darkness at this point. Changeling is probably the one that I'd by default say is my favorite. But Werewolf as a LARP I found was really compelling. And I also think that this new edition is great, and it depends on kind of how we use it and tweak it. The real thing that I would point out for Werewolf for me is it was it was a wonderful experience, but I don't know if I would play it the same way. So I can't answer that question right now. But it's definitely one that I'm very, very excited to go back to. I also ran a rather large werewolf game online for quite some time, a persistent 24/7, and that was rewarding up until the point where it wasn't. All. Reading aloud, I didn't take it from the AMA. I took it. Now the queue is still there. Is the prospect of annihilation something you look forward to, or look forward to of fear in this for your characters?
I assume.
Or fear, yeah. So I'll throw that to you, actually.
So I guess I'd ask to define annihilation. Like, I know the apocalypse, is that sort of what you mean? Because to me, annihilation is like everyone dying. That doesn't sound like a fun story point. That's just like, oh, boom, the planet evaporated and everyone's dead. So I'm not quite sure. Is it the looming apocalypse? Because that I do find interesting in the way they've framed it, at least in this book in 5th ed. I find that it is compelling. Sometimes it feels a little too real, and I think that's something that we're gonna sort of find the balance for, because yeah, there's a lot of terrible things happening with like the climate and the planet, and I think there are some ways that some people, this is something we've discussed with many games, some people may find it really nice to be able to tackle these subjects in a game environment. And some people may just be like, nah, I don't want to deal with this. This is too close to home. Yeah.
Ardrick, that's fantastic.
Very true.
About
Very
reading
true.
aloud. I will point out that the concept of annihilation, the threat of death in this game, I always talk with my...
I guess I'm not, sorry, I literally don't, is this a book term that I'm not familiar with?
Well, so in earlier versions of Werewolf, the concept of apocalypse was nebulous.
Yeah.
And the idea is apocalypse mean literally the end of the world and everything is gone? Or does it mean that, everything that you love has changed?
Yeah.
So there was some kind of confusion here. The idea, though, is that now the apocalypse has either already happened or is in the process of happening, that werewolves have lost. And
Yeah,
that
that's
now they
apocalypse.
have to fight back.
I'm just not clear on what annihilation means.
It means total destruction.
But I guess to me, I don't know, like, is that related to the book?
No.
Okay. Then,
It's not really a book term.
Okay, cool. Keep going then.
Flower of August mentions, aren't tenants sort of meant to be a guideline for what is considered unacceptable in the story? For example, if there's a tenant against harming innocents, it would be expected for characters to react to someone else doing it anyway, or is that more V5? It's very specifically about, in Werewolf, the Chronicle tenets are ways that we're trying to guide how the characters move and react, because you can change them. There is a traditionalist version of the game where it's basically like respect your elders, the litany is important, that kind of thing. And there's others which are radicalist, which is like reject the old ways, burn the systems down, kind of thing. And they change the way that the game happens. I don't know here, I will call it up because I also don't want to tell you the wrong thing. But if we look at Chronicle tenets specifically, let's just get it over here. So, Chronicle tenets. It's the foundation of the stories that you're going to tell. They're statements expressing the values the Chronicle seeks to convey. So it's about the story, and it's less about what's unacceptable for the story and more about what you want the story to be about. Mm-hmm. So you can choose back and forth.
Yeah.
Both work. And then reading aloud, just tacking on to the other question, for the DM additional is the idea of total party kill in the same manner, something I would consider reasonable. Okay, Werewolf the Apocalypse 5th edition makes it very hard to kill a werewolf. You must use silver, fire, or... Okay, so this actually is... Sorry, I forgot. There is an annihilation is mentioned.
It's mentioned once in the book, and it's about how to just, like, Banes can only be gotten rid of through total annihilation, so...
Okay.
Yeah. It might be from an older version?
Yeah, you'd have to be total destruction of the werewolf's body. The specific for death
Yeah.
So there is... It is a... Oh, death isn't even here.
Yeah.
Thanks. Put death in your...
Index, yeah.
In your index here. That's.
I guess you could search death.
Yeah, I'll do that. Oh, it's because it's under incapacitation and death, which is like, that's not useful.
Yeah.
Okay, a Guru has been incapacitated by aggravated damage, is taken out of action. Great. No other forms of damage short of complete bodily annihilation can kill a Guru, as their mangled form refuses to yield to anything but the banes of their existence. It's tough to kill a death machine that doesn't want to be killed. So, this has been left open to interpretation. I believe it's been left open to interpretation deliberately. It's hard to kill a Guru, I think, is kind of what the point is. And I think that, for me, if a werewolf is attacking another werewolf and puts it down and then just continues to savage the body and ripping it apart, I would count that as annihilation. I know that for other people it's like, no, it has to be like literally atomization of somebody or whatever.
Yeah, no.
I don't. I do think that otherwise it's just way too difficult to kill a werewolf.
Yeah, like because you can do really intense heals, regeneration by using rage checks while you're in a form, one of the supernatural forms. I think that, yeah, literally you have to either use fire, silver, or like make it so that it can't obviously heal, sort of thing. Yeah.
Like the idea is that if somebody comes along and just like rolls down their window and fires a machine gun at the window at your werewolf, riddles it with bullets until it falls down and then goes away, the werewolf will eventually regenerate and wake back up. I would say that in terms of if somebody riddled a werewolf with bullets and then got out and they like hacked the body to pieces, like big, like tiny pieces, not like, oh, well, we cut off.
Well, you could like, it's the old. I know it's more of a vampire thing, but you don't have to just put a stake in the heart, but you also have to like separate the head from the body in certain myths and things like that, or you have to like destroy the coffin, things like that. So I feel like it's that, Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't just leave the body there; it will eventually heal.
So as Flower of August says, this means killing another werewolf is also going to be a very deliberate choice most of the time. And I think that's the point. Mm-hmm. It has to be a deliberate choice. I don't like total party kills most of the time. I feel like total party kills are a way that you've basically admitted I made it too difficult. And my players I didn't guide my players correctly towards an appropriate level challenge. Mm-hmm. I think that there are opportunities where a TPK can be amazing. There are chronicles where you want to end with a TPK. It's fantastic. I can recommend a web series for you if you want to find out what that looks like. But in general, I don't, because I find that killing a player character means that you are making a very deliberate choice about how that player character's story ends. And if that is a great ending, I'm all for killing. But oftentimes, if it's by random chance, it really sucks. So I'm not necessarily thinking this is a game which is going to make me feel good about total party kills. Mm-hmm.
But it does mean that you could total party wipe. And, some, either they don't try to actually kill you once you're down, or like some NPC drags you back to the base or whatever, back to the cairn. So I kind of prefer that, in that there are contexts in which you could accidentally or intentionally wipe the party, like everyone's KO, beaten up, they're down, like they got defeated, without being like, oh shit, I accidentally killed, I killed players when I didn't want to. or I killed all but one. How do we pretend, okay, well, this one person now suddenly finds 4 new friends tomorrow. They're going to be best buddies. Yeah, that's always rough. So, yeah.
I think the takeaway that I'm getting from this is a werewolf's death is almost always going to be a deliberate action. Whether it's a player character's deliberate action or an NPC's deliberate action, but it's going to be specific. And to me, that makes it more interesting. I'm not going to be as tied to the idea of like, well, it has to be fire or silver or atomization. I genuinely believe that if a werewolf just pops claws and continues just absolutely laying into somebody for like 3 minutes, not like one extra hit, but like a really long time, that would be enough. But I think that for the most part, if you wanted to kill a werewolf, the idea of like, I think it's going to wake up again, light the body on fire, that's a pretty normal to think, right?
Yeah, I mean, we just watched The Mummy last night because Liz and I are, have questionable tastes in films, perhaps.
Still have never seen The Mummy.
But there's definitely that like, just shooting it is just like, okay, I'm going to keep coming at you. The idea that you have to do more because they're these huge, powerful, like werewolves in the older versions. I know they've play balanced it a bit more, but they used to be like, werewolves would just splatter basically any other group, any other supernatural, because they are the war machines. So they, the fact that, you need to do more than just shoot them a few times feels right.
Right. So in that case, now that I kind of understand the concept of the question here, it is something that I also think you're just going to have to figure out what's appropriate for your group, right? While I completely understand that there are players and storytellers who have read the core book and said there's a lot of things that they've left vague and I want definitive answers as opposed to vagueness, I get it. In general, I do think that sometimes it's good to sort of let players figure things out the way that they want to do it, how they choose to interpret it. Remember that the book, and along with basically every role-playing book that exists now, says, hey, guess what? If you don't like a rule, change it. If you don't like a setting thing, change it. There's nothing in this book that's set in stone. And I think that a lot of people will look at a thing and say, well, there's one rule in here that I don't like, and therefore the book sucks. And I would say, or there's 99% of a book that's pretty cool and 1% that you can very easily change. Hello, Jan3. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
So Ardric, this is something that I actually feel I like quite a bit.
Yeah.
In that vein, I also won't allow one-shot kills by silver bullets. I think an interpretation of the rule says they have to be finished off after being brought down. 100% I agree.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would say is if you push a werewolf into a volcano, they're probably dead.
Yeah.
Like,
or if you have a Tommy gun full of silver bullets somehow, and you just do this to them, yeah, technically that's like one round, maybe, possibly, but like they're maybe dead.
yeah. So I'm curious what you mean by saying that it's turned werewolf into furry vampire.
Yeah.
So if you could just elaborate on that for a little bit, I'd like to hear it. Obviously, if like I'm not saying your interpretation's wrong,
Yeah.
I'm just curious as to why you feel that way, because that's not what I got.
No.
A werewolf crawling out of a volcano sounds incredibly badass.
Yeah.
Mr. Rich, now that you say it, yeah, it totally is.
Well, that's when they catch themselves like with their claws on the side of the volcano just before their feet touch the lava.
Well, you fucking Anakin Skywalker.
And they're like their fur is all like scorched off, but they're
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. If a
Swims
game
in lava.
swims in lava, fantastic.
Yep. Deep name.
If a game if the game says, hey, I don't want to kill this character right here, and there's an ostensible way that I can make that happen, go for it. Like I just love like if I shot somebody with a silver bullet, like a Guru with a silver bullet, and it does 8 damage and they only had 1 damage left, I wouldn't kill them. I'd be like, great, that definitely puts them down.
They aren't getting up
They're not getting up for
hours,
quite
days,
a long time.
yeah.
But you want to finish that, you've got to walk over and go, pop.
One more time.
You got to finish it.
Yeah.
And I really look forward to the moment where a player character is going to be put in a situation where they might have fought with another guru, and someone's going to say, finish them, and it will be a question as to whether they deliberately make that choice, because it's part of Werewolf in that guru don't always get along with other guru, and sometimes that comes to blows, and sometimes that comes to death. But it doesn't have to. But it's not. It depends on the tenants, because I'll spoil something here. None of our tenants says anything about whether or not you should kill a guru. So that kind of says that the players don't necessarily have a direction as to whether they should be that violent or not.
It also just feels very correct to action movies. Like the hero gets shot and stabbed and pushed down the stairs and all these other things, and they keep getting back up. And even like the big bad enemy, it's often like they knock them down, they knock them down, they knock them down. It's only once they're down, and then there's a final finishing blow, or they get yeeted into the lava, except they come back to their Terminator. But it feels narratively correct with the universe that we all live in, where action films, yeah, you have to deliver the finishing blow. It's not. Montreal isn't. Sorry, I saw that you were looking it up, but Montreal isn't a volcano. It's a like magma bubble.
Yeah.
But we can change it. It's our universe. We do what we want.
BSDs, Ardrick. That's one of the things, the lore sheet where it's like, you have contacts in the Black Spiral Dancers, and if I had a player come to me and say, I want to have a lore sheet with Black Spiral Dancer on it, I'd be like, okay, so you want to basically toy with death at all times. Like, that's my interpretation of BSDs.
Yeah.
It's not everyone's, so I'm fine with the lore sheet existing. But yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And this leads me, while we're here, I'm going to say, look, there's 3 tips that I'm going to throw out here. 3 things, before we get to the other questions, that I wrote down in terms of what people need to do in order to enjoy 5th edition. It's the top 3. Top 3 things. First we're going to go with
This one, yeah.
yeah, we'll go with this first, and then we'll go back.
Yeah.
Okay, so too many changes, too much tribe versus tribe crap. Politics on that level feels like Vampire, and I don't like Vampire for exactly that reason. I've been a werewolf storyteller for 28 years, and I have the version of the game I need for my game, so W5 doesn't bother me that much. So, first of all, that's a great attitude.
Thank you for being like, I don't like this, but it doesn't mean I can't play the game I want. Thank you. Thank you. There's so many people out there that, despite having the game they like, get mad that something new is made. So, thumbs up there.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic attitude. I am so down with that. Also, you've added anything I need that I can't find somewhere else, I can write it myself. Yup. Like, great. That's magic of role-playing.
Yeah.
Tribe politics have always been there, in my opinion. Again, my opinion, my interpretation of the game. I don't feel like they've changed that too much. There's always been an emphasis in this game over the fact that there are times where a guru will fight the worm, but sometimes a guru's biggest enemy is a different guru. And it's not because they're on different sides, they're on the same side, but they just disagree way too much on how those sides go. So that's, I also feel like this game, like Ardrick is saying here, is I don't feel like you have to have those politics in the game if you don't want to. In fact, I feel like this edition, more than the others, have made it so that certain tribes can coexist without it automatically being fucked up. Glasswalkers and Red Talons would be the ones that would come to mind first. Red Talons, in previous versions of the game, basically were genocidal. We want to kill all the humans, is like the core tenet of the Red Talons. The most pacifistic of Red Talons were like, we should definitely make sure that all the humans are not alive at some point. Like they maybe we won't kill them, but like humans are bad, right? new Red Talons don't have that. But the thing is, if Glasswalkers are all about tech and how tech can potentially aid in the fight against the worm, and Red Talons are in the old game like kill all the humans, there's no way that a Glasswalker and a Red Talon would be able to look at each other and be like, you know what, we're the best of friends because we agree with everything else. Like it's just way too kind of cut and dried. Now it's not. Red Talons are very much like, you know, I don't agree with necessarily the idea that technology is good. In fact, I think we should go back, regress from that. But it's definitely a lot less sort of like kill all the humans. So there's that.
I'm just going to jump in before we move on.
Sure.
That so I'm coming to this version of Werewolf fresh. I was slightly aware of Werewolf before, but I really didn't dig into it at all. I've played 20th, so I've played Vampire 20th, I've played Changeling 20th, and I feel like, at least with those editions, Vampire is definitely very political. Changeling can be political depending on what you want to do with your campaign, and that is something that, as much as we've in our campaigns touched on politics and had story arcs that were a bit politic focused, I never felt reading this book that this was going to be a politics game in any format. I think that there's a possibility to make that your game, but for me, coming fresh to this without knowing any of the previous versions, that's not something that I was like, oh god, okay, we're gonna have to cut out these 50 pages and find a way to carve our niche out.
And
personally,
I can still see that people may interpret it that way, and I don't think you're wrong.
No.
I think that's how
you've got the version you want. Go play it. Thumbs up. Thank you.
Things like what they've done to the Get Offenders puts them at odds with other tribes in a brand new way. Yes, and that actually leads in. So the first thing that my 3 tips to enjoying 5th, right? That actually leads into it, and this is again, if you enjoy the other editions, they're there. Play them. And it doesn't make you a less good role player. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. It means you found the game that you love. Great.
Yeah.
But if you want to enjoy 5th edition, the first thing that you have to do, tip number 1, you gotta let your old characters go. The ones that you have now and the ones in your mind that you never got to play, because they belong to another system and a different setting. Werewolf 5th edition is not in the same setting, and it is not the same system. They have similarities. It is a reboot. It is inspired by, there are definitely themes that are similar, but they are not the same. And I think that this is the number one thing that is preventing people from embracing 5th edition, because whether they realize it or not, they're thinking, but these characters that are in my head can't exist in this setting, or they wouldn't be the same. Everything about the Get Offenders, for instance, even if your character isn't one of the Get themselves, they have a pre-existing feeling of how the Get Offenders work, and maybe they have Get friends, and maybe they just enjoy living in a universe where the Get are still a member of the Guru Nation, and you can't have that character anymore, and that's really rough.
Yeah, and there are things that you loved about the system that don't exist anymore, and so, it's like, they don't really match up in that way. I mean, we made this mistake with systems that are supposed to kind of match up, where we did port characters from Exalted Third into Essence, and trying to take these characters and change all of their abilities to match the new system, despite them being parallel. Just the characters didn't feel right. So yeah.
I'm going to say this. I think this is a fantastic thing that you're saying here. Double-entendres works great for my group. The Chronicle we were playing started in 2017. We expect it to end sometime in the mid-2030s. I'm not about to upset the apple cart by changing all the rules in the middle.
Don't. Yeah.
Fucking right.
If you're out there and you're playing a werewolf game, unless everyone at the table is like, yeah, actually, this fixes all of the things that we haven't enjoyed, okay, maybe. But also, maybe just new characters, new campaign. Because, as I was just saying, don't upset the apple cart. Don't change the rules in the middle.
There's very few things that I can give my professional opinion on, and this is one of them, because I am literally a narrative designer for games. Your game systems affects your narrative affects your game systems. It is not as easy as just plucking the story from one and the characters and moving it over to another thing and putting them down and expecting that everything will be the same. They won't. Your characters from W20 or Werewolf Revised or 2nd or 1st edition cannot survive in Werewolf 5th intact, because too much has changed. not only in terms of how the setting has deliberately changed, but also the rules of the game change the way that characters feel. It will be disappointing. There is very little that I think that I can say more than, if you're going to change your system or the setting, let your old characters go. They cannot exist. You know, like, mourn them,
Yeah.
but they're gone.
Yeah.
The second tip that I have is that you have to embrace the fact that every form is now useful, not just Krynos. I think that this is one of the things that a lot of people are feeling, is that, but Krynos is not just the war form, but like, it's also a natural form. I should be able to hang out in it.
It is the werewolf. When you think werewolf, that's what you picture.
Yeah. Flower of August is absolutely a
Yeah.
lesson we learned from Exalt Witch Academy.
Yeah.
But in this game, Krynos does not have the same. First of all, again, let your old characters die. Krynos isn't the same. But if Krynos was just always better than Glabro, for instance, there'd be never a reason to use Glabro other than, but the delirium. And I feel like the game designers have made a very deliberate choice here to say, sometimes we want you to make a very deliberate choice. Instead of just saying, oh, we're going to be in combat, let's pop claws and go. And we'll just stay that way until the end.
Yeah.
So you have to embrace the fact that sometimes you may want to be in Hispo. You may want to be in Glabro. You may even want to stay in Hamid or Lupus, because that is still a completely legitimate way of playing the game. So.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's something that I'm starting to feel out when I think about, potential combat situations specifically, is, okay, where am I, first off? Are there a bunch of humans around? Should I just stay in human form? Or how likely am I to be, have someone wander by and see me? But yeah, specifically, I think that the power that you get from the full Krynos form, the full maximum werewolf form, is intense, and it is pure, rage embodied, and all of these things that are correct to the theme. But I also feel that there's something correct about it being too much to maintain for a long time, because you are still part human, right? You are still part wolf. To me, again, coming in fresh, it feels correct for flavor, and it definitely feels correct mechanically, because, as you say, there would be no reason. You'd be like, great, I'm in this form until I have to go out in public, because why would I not be?
Final one is, be generous with rage if you want, whether you're a player or a storyteller. Because I guarantee you that most of the time, if players want rage, it's because they want to do something cool. And if you say, but I don't want you to do something cool, it doesn't always feel that great. Rage economy is probably one of the biggest sticking points for players in this game, despite the fact that the book very deliberately says, give more rage if you want more rage. Give less rage if you want less rage. And I think that some of this is the vagueness that they've left open of how to gain rage or not. Because they've lifted some suggestions on how you can gain rage, but they haven't made a very definitive, this does this, that does that, this is a thing for the thing. And I have basically hoped and elected to encourage people to say, if you want more rage, you don't need that much of a justification to say how you get it. I don't want players to say I gain one rage a turn every turn, always. But I definitely don't want players to feel like I never want to use my cool shit because I might not have rage.
Yeah.
I want them to grapple with the concept of having, but I only have one rage left. Dare I risk it, thus losing the wolf? Or not. I think that can be an interesting pressure point to apply to players, and I think that makes for dramatic stories, and that's cool.
Yeah.
But I definitely don't want them to be confronted with this at all times.
Well, I can never use these abilities because I never gain rage, so I'm always at one. Yeah, I think one thing that we likened it to is stunting in Exalted, where if you describe your thing in a really cool way, you get +1 dice. Or if it's super cool, everyone reacts, that's 2 dice. If it's a huge moment, everyone thinks it's so cool, they'll be talking about it for weeks. That's a 3-point stunt sort of thing. I think that, rage, maybe it isn't a 1-point stunt. It isn't just, I'm in a fight, so I gain rage. But I'm gonna fight, and this guy turned away from me and decided to go fight someone else because he didn't think I was a big enough opponent, oh man, I am definitely gaining rage, right? There are ways to, and that is the rage equivalent of stunting, I would say.
I also have reminded people that there are ways to generate rage that might seem counterintuitive. If you feel like you need your rune to move forward and attack and they are low on rage, hit them. Like a packmate, strike your own packmate and be like, get in the game. And that can be enough to give them rage, right? Like there's ways to do it. Now, obviously, if somebody did that, I would say, sure, they'll gain rage, but maybe you've done some superficial damage as well.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the trade-off if you aren't using a specific gift or rite that grants rage, that there's going to be a penalty associated with it, and it's just the way it goes. But the rage economy is something that you can dick with the way that you do, right?
Yeah.
Or as Ellie Spot says, just give them a nice little tap. Just a little tap on the butt, make them feel like...
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I was like, I bat Liz's hair. I bat it again. I bat it again. I mean, I would get mauled, but she'd definitely be angry. Probably, yeah. Like, there are ways to piss off your friends.
Flower of August says, in regards to rage economy, I wonder how good the flow of take one rage will be. Something that goes by fast or something where the player has to pause the action and ask about it often. I think that in the first couple of sessions, it'll be a discussion. Then after that, it's going to be like, I'm fully expecting for my players to say, I gain one rage, and for me to be like not even reacting to it and just being like, Or I guess that's a reaction, a nod is a reaction.
Yeah,
but just nodding and being like, yeah, cool, and then moving on. The way that we actually have our stream set up, which on Sunday you'll get to see it, and it is pretty fucking baller, I'm not gonna lie. It'll be the sort of thing that I'll also be able to visually see what happens with that. So I can, and I reserve the right to always be like, no, I don't think that you would gain rage here. And if I have to, I will use that, because the thing is, I trust my players to not abuse this, but I also know that I have to set some boundaries and establishments, because I also don't want players to feel like, well, they have rage 5 all the time, right?
Oh. Beep, boop. Computer went to sleep.
Kate's going away. And the computer went to sleep. I see.
Our bot went to sleep. Sadness.
It's coming back.
There we go.
So those are the three things that I think people need the top 3 things that people need in order to come to Werewolf 5th edition. Let your old characters go and your old preconceptions go. Understand that they don't exist in this world. Make sure that while you're playing, you are, here, hold on. Let me just make sure that it's up here. Make sure that you understand that the forms are all useful now, and that it isn't, Krynos is just not the same as it was, and it isn't 3 default forms and 2, or even worse, it's actually more like 2 default forms, like your birth form and Krynos.
Yeah.
And like, otherwise I don't normally spend time in other things. And then finally, with rage, encourage the amount of rage you want in the game, and don't be beholden to only the examples in the book. Get more rage if you think you need more rage. It's cool. It's great. But now that we've got all that, Flower of August asks, what are your thoughts on wolf-born versus human-born werewolves in W5? How big of a deal do you think it should be in a chronicle, if at all? Let's ask the non-werewolf expert.
In this version, it implies that you can be either. It isn't a big deal. And
Toss it back?
Yeah, I'm gonna toss it back.
So I think that it's a big deal if you want it to be a big deal. There's a lot of points in Werewolf that are conflict possible. And one of the conflict possibles that you could have is somebody who is wolf-born versus someone who is human-born, and what does that mean? And is that going to be a sticking point? Is it going to be an issue? Is it going to be something that people will say they're very different? Or is it going to be that they're all just gathered together, and because they're all Garou, they kind of, the difference is effectively neutralized? I think that Werewolf 5th Edition has gone to great lengths to basically say it no longer matters that much of who your parents are or how you choose to breed. It's kind of gone. And so one of the things that's naturally sort of taken away from that is an emphasis on the idea of wolf versus human-born. Mm-hmm. Wolf-born don't even have different mechanics to them. They used to, and they don't. Not anymore. I agree with this choice because I did get the impression that there were going to be players out there who would choose to play in old games what were called lupus, or those who were born of wolf, simply because they got to start with 5 gnosis instead of 1. And that was why they did it.
Yep.
And you could say, like, hey, is that why you did it? And they'd be like, no, it's because I wanted to know what it was like to play as a wolf. And you kind of have to look at it and be like, really?
Yeah.
Or is that bullshit?
Like, I think it's going to be as big of a deal as your table wants it to be. If one of you is wolf-born and the rest of them are human-born, you know, maybe they'll be like, why does everyone look at these little devices in their pocket so often? There's so many other things that you can spend your time on, for example, right? Or maybe they'll have been guru for long enough that they kind of get it. They're just a little different. Or maybe you'll all be wolf-born and you'll all spend a lot of time talking about how you run through the forests and chase animals and splash in ponds. Like, it's up to you and your table what types of stories you want and how big of a deal you want it to be. Maybe it's just that, yeah, when you're back at the cairn, you hang out in wolf form and they hang out in human form, and that's cool.
I think that it's telling to me that when I see a lot of people create characters these days, there are far fewer that I've seen create wolf-born characters. And I suspect that that's because of the mechanics as opposed to the genuine interest. I think that it would be great if a player wants to explore that. But one thing that I did make clear to my players, and this was a personal thing, not a this is how Werewolf works, but this is how I didn't want, is what I didn't want is for somebody to make a wolf character and for that to be the heavy focus of their character. For it to be like, what is this thing? Like you said, like, why does everybody look at these phones? And what is this thing? How do you create fire with your hand? And I was like, if you're a werewolf, you have grown up to a certain extent. You are rapidly introduced to human society. You can't kind of just go around and also use like Edding's wolf speak, which was something that I was like, I just don't want that.
Yeah.
I don't want you to speak like a fantasy character in the game.
Yeah, Born Yesterday ain't fun. In our Changeling Chronicle, Jon introduced a Guru NPC, and one of the things that sort of implied that she was wolf-born was that she didn't really understand, like, going shopping for clothes. She had clothes that she was happy with. The idea of, like, oh, let's go find nice outfits. She was just like, I don't get this. Sure, let's do this. But there was definitely, that's like a nuance of human society that is nice without being like, what, clothes? No, me naked all time. I speak like caveman. Yeah. So
it's a delicate balance. I think that if that's the story you're interested in examining, great. It's the same sort of thing that I feel like you don't want to have one player character to come in with something that warps everything else in the game around them. The idea of, well, everything has to be examined through the eyes of a wolf, and we got to spend 20 minutes explaining things to the wolf, and then the wolf explains back about why it's weird and dumb. If that's the way that you want to warp the game, fine. But everybody has to want to warp the game that way, and in general, not everybody's going to want to, because it kind of puts the focus on one PC as opposed to all of them. Yeah.
Born tomorrow instead of born yesterday.
Yeah. Flower of August says, one thought I have about wolf-born characters is in regards to how old should we consider them, from, say, a perspective of what is appropriate in terms of romance, etc. with them. If they're past the point of puberty, if they've basically, I would consider them the age of consent, then they are the equivalent to adults. Yeah. The way that I've always explained it in my head, whether or not that's correct or not, is that a guru who is wolf-born is born as a wolf, lives as a wolf, and then has this very, very rapid sort of like absorbing everything that they can, and it doesn't take that long for them to sort of get what's going on. It's sort of like if I have a cup and the cup is this big, I can fill it with water. And then when they go through their first change, it's the equivalent of I pick up a jug and I pour the water into the jug, and now there's a lot of space in there, and that water just fills up very quickly to that point, so that even though it's still going to be different, there isn't this kind of weird, it's sort of like how elves, like if elves live 500 years,
Yeah, they
why the hell?
reach maturity at 120 or some shit. Like,
Yeah. Like, but why, like, does that mean that an elf who's 60 years old is still in diapers?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, but they have different priorities about the speed of learning, and they just have different ways of absorbing new experiences. So that's the sort of way that I go through that. Kung Fu Fenris mentions...
To me, again, it's talk to your table, but I would basically be like, great, are they an adult wolf? Great, then they're an adult human, even if they're only like 3 years old as an animal. Animal maturity goes at a completely different scale.
Yeah. W20 Changing Ways went into this. Wolfborn turn at the equivalent human age and receive the human guru lifespan after that, which I agree with.
Yeah.
I would feel like it would be awfully strange, not necessarily wrong for your chronicle if that's what you wanted, but it'd be a bit strange if like, oh yeah, I want to be a wolfborn. Oh, it turns out that I have a lifespan that's a lot less than everyone else. Of course, werewolves...
I'm 7.
Yeah,
I don't
werewolves
want to play with someone who's 7. Like that's not a story for me personally. That would be a great NPC, maybe, possibly, but like not really what I want my table to be about personally.
Yeah. In general, when it comes to things like, is it weird if I want to have sex with a werewolf who's only been alive for like 3 years? It's fine. If the guru is at the point of the age of maturity, it's totally fine. Don't get hung up on the number, get hung up on the matter of consent. Can you give consent? The reason why we have age of consent rules here is because we don't believe that young children have the ability to give consent properly. Because they're just not developed enough in their heads to understand the ramifications of what they're doing.
Prefrontal cortex.
So
Yep.
that's
Yep.
the way it is. Yeah, 7 years old, not 3 years old. Forgive me for that, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's a function more of consent than it is about age.
John went over his 3 rules. You'll have to roll the tape to see that.
Yeah, I went over my 3 things to embrace 5th edition. I might make those into YouTube shorts.
Yeah, that might be good.
And just toss it up there. But we have a couple of other questions going on, so why don't we have a look at them? Osab asks, how are you finding creating NPCs using my typical method in W5? Does W5's use of keywords make it easier for you to pick tribes for the guru's NPCs compared to previous versions? Are there any other features that make it easier or harder? One thing that Werewolf 5th edition has done very well is they've had the ability to say, okay, well, you can assign difficulty numbers to NPCs, one for the things that they're really good at and one for the other things that aren't their specialty. And you can kind of tune power levels based on that so that you don't have to create a whole sheet. Sounds good to me. It's kind of basically what I already do. But to have it in the book and be like, look, for the most part, you don't have to worry that much about this, great, fantastic, wonderful. The use of keywords make it easier to pick tribes. I think the keywords are fantastic for new players. It was the sort of thing that I asked each of the players when they were making their characters and picking a tribe. Hey, does it sound like you're pursuing? Does it sound like you're infiltrating? Does it sound like you're, and this is for Auspice and Tribe that has come up. And I felt like that was great because it was a good shorthand for them to pick up, even though Tribe and Auspice are nuanced and like keywords aren't the be all and end all, but it was fantastic for someone who didn't know the game already to help pick it up fast.
Yeah, I think there's that, and I think that it's also it's helpful for the tribes that have had perhaps a bit more change than others from the former versions, just to really remind you, like, oh yeah, it isn't kill all humans, it's, defeat the worm, or whatever the changes are, right? So the nuances that they did with those verbs can still help a bit in that sense. But yeah, for someone like you, you're just gonna be like, no, they're obviously at this and to this.
So I would say that the keywords can be easy for me to also pick up on how things have changed rapidly. One complaint that a lot of people have had is like, oh, but now there isn't that much information about each of the individual tribes. But they're also basing this on the fact that W20 was the accumulation of a lot of game time, and they still had access to things like all the tribe books and all the other source books. Like, in a core game, you can't go into that much detail without overwhelming your players. You're not coming at it from a beginner's perspective, so I can understand how it feels badly, but it's not actually great game design to say, here's 50 pages about each different tribe. That's just way too much information for somebody to get into, and they will inevitably bounce. But otherwise, I find like the NPCs are, you know, they're working the way that I would hope for. So we'll see which ones come out. My players don't even know yet. Am I planning to track rage levels, rage dice, and rage spending for NPC GRU, or use the book's suggestion of 1 rage costing ability per turn? I'm debating this myself. I don't normally create full sheets for NPCs. I do eventually. If an NPC becomes important enough that it is actually important to do things like, hey, how much stealth does this person actually have? What gifts do they actually hold on to? I will. But I tend not to, because I never know if an NPC is going to like grab players or if they're just going to bounce off them and then we'll never see them again. And then I don't want to spend the time to stat out an entire character for that. So in general, at the beginning, yep, I'd probably end up using 1 rage costing ability per turn or no rage costing ability per turn, depending on the needs of the combat. Running World of Darkness combat, whatever edition you choose, is always going to be an exercise in finesse. It is not easy. It's the numbers aren't there for you like they are in D&D. You have to figure that shit out because players can be vastly different levels of combat able, for instance, depending on how they stat their characters in the beginning. Because it is possible for someone to start with Strength 4 and Brawl 4. And it's also possible for someone to start with Strength 2 and Brawl 1.
Yeah.
And there's a huge disparity there. So it's impossible for you to say, well, for beginning characters, you'll have this. And then for Sparta, so you just can't. So the turn NPC into a static difficulty option is amazing. I agree, 100%. Yeah. I could still track rage without a full sheet. I also keep in mind things like health, rage. I will keep track of them if they are important. I will absolutely sometimes use an out, like, for instance, if I feel like the characters have been doing a really good job in the combat, but the numbers aren't there, I might have a character lose the wolf, right? To be like, yep, this person just like, in order to keep up, they had to blow too much rage, and then they have lost the wolf, and they shift back down to Homid or Lupus, and that's just the way it is. So I will definitely do that. But in terms of whether or not I'll keep meticulous records, I never keep meticulous records.
Yeah, that's the thing. John's play style, he does, you know, sometimes type down little notes about things, but it's extremely minimal. There's no book. There's no, like, he'll print out a reference sheet. He'll usually have a copy of the character sheet to look at, but throughout all of our campaigns, he tracks it in his mind, and he knows the systems well enough that he's like, oh yeah, they should have about this many health levels, and they should probably have this much available. But like with Changeling, I never felt like you were tracking how much glamour and willpower any of our opponents had available. Like, you had a sense of it, but you weren't writing it down, or...
I tend to have a sense of how much someone should be capable of doing. I don't keep meticulous records in the same way that I also don't insist that everybody tracks how many arrows they currently have on their person. But I also I tend not to just make the assumption that they can just do whatever they want at any point, because that's not fair.
And I agree that 1 rage ability per turn, if your rage economy in your game just is nowhere near that, then yeah, that definitely does feel like OP, that if they can use 1 rage a turn, why can't the players? I think that, as you were saying, you can't necessarily gain 1 rage per turn in combat. So I think it's down to figuring out what your play balance at your table needs to be.
Yeah. Flower of August mentions this specifically as an important thing. as long as my players trust I'm not being unfair to them, I'm fine with doing NPCs broad strokes, especially for resource and combat. This isn't D&D. I agree with this. In D&D, you do need to keep track because I think a big part of D&D is the math and the strategy of how players go. Because World of Darkness is far more narrative driven and it has much more vague combat, as much as, you know, it's like this pool versus this pool go, it is not nearly as important to be number specific. But if you're playing D&D, then if players are like, why am I bothering to strategize if you've basically decided how the combat's going to end anyway? That's no fun.
Or like, oh, well, you know, D&D is so specific, especially because, you know, instead of having like 10 health levels total, if you're really high level, it's like, no, you start off with 10 health level, like 10 HP. So it's also like the scale and the minutia of, oh, well, I dealt 17 damage instead of 18 damage can literally be the difference at the end of combat, whether the enemy stays up for another round. It's too granular to be that vague with. Jumping back to Rage, as Flower of August says, if it's one NPC versus multiple PCs, then them having one Rage ability per turn. So maybe that's a way to look at it, is that the enemies spend roughly one Rage ability per turn, depending on power levels. Like, maybe that's it? Because I was definitely thinking multiple versus multiple.
Kung Fu Fenris asks, here, let's actually get it properly. 3 rounds and out. How do you feel about that rule of thumb? Anything in the game, or in any game, that says, hey, check in to make sure that everybody's actually still having a good time, is a good rule. 3 rounds and out. We actually, we were doing some practice rolls for combat today, and I deliberately engineered a situation where I was like, okay, well, we've done 3 rounds. So how would we determine what's going to happen from here? And it does make a lot of sense. You know, there's a certain amount of like excitement that comes with combat, and the game doesn't say you can only ever do 3 rounds and that's the maximum and that's it.
It's more like, check in after 3 rounds, be like, great, so you've killed this guy, but there's these 2 other guys, but they're looking pretty hurt too. Do you want to just say you win? Like, do we need to keep rolling dice? Is it narratively interesting? Or are you really quite evenly matched? Is it a slugfest? Then maybe you do want to continue it. Or maybe you're like, no, you know what? As much as we're pretty evenly matched, we, the player team, feel like we're going to surrender or we're going to admit defeat or whatever, because we're okay getting captured because we actually want to get to their base anyway and we think we can infiltrate from their jail. Like, whatever is narratively interesting, but it's nice that it's not just like, okay, we're in combat, the next 2 hours is rolling dice.
And maybe that's exactly what you want.
Go for it.
Go for it. If you can't come to a consensus on how the combat's supposed to end, maybe you just keep going if it's fun. If it's the big bad and you really want to find out what's going to happen, keep it going. It's cool. But the thing about 3 rounds and out that I also especially like is that if the party is split, it means that the other players don't have to be like, well, combat's going to go for like 9 rounds, and then they check out. Because what's the point?
It's also like, okay, party split. So you're like, okay, I pan over to Kate's character who's in combat. Okay, you do like 2 rounds. Okay, we pan back to the other guys. They're like, well, we can't move because it's been 3 seconds here and it's been 30 minutes over here. So it's definitely, it helps with speeding up any asymmetrical nature in the distribution of where your players are.
This is an incredible analogy, and I'm throwing it up there. That's why you type GG in StarCraft instead of forcing someone to kill every single building. Otherwise, you just end up playing Monopoly. Yep. Yeah, you're just like, great, you won. Like, you click the forfeit button, you killed me. You don't actually have to be like, okay, now you have to click for the next 20 minutes to really get the win. Yeah, I like that. Monopoly has, there's a certain point in Monopoly where it's just a slide of the inevitable. And sure, maybe there's a 0.05% chance that you're going to make it out of it. But is it really worth it rolling for another 45 minutes just to find out whether that's going to happen or not? Probably not.
Yeah.
Games are meant to be fun. And if combat isn't fun past the first 3 rounds, don't play it out. Just describe it. That's the important thing. And in the same way of StarCraft, or it's also something that people have noticed in MOBAs like League of Legends or Dota. If you know you're gonna lose, then but like you know that it's gonna take at least another 10 minutes for that to happen. That's when players start doing things like flaming each other, they start acting out, they troll, and that is not a fun experience. If everybody just agrees that the game is over and they all say GG, you can move on to the next game, or in role-playing, move on to the next scene.
Or as Ardric mentioned, you can, which is in the book, which I really liked, is that you can use a scene change after 3 options to change things up and keep interest, which is like, okay, great, you were fighting in the hallway, it's been 3 rounds, well, now you bust out into the lobby and that changes the dynamic of what's going on. Or you were on the balcony and like, now you've jumped down to street level and you're in an alleyway. There are ways of, it's nice. I do think that's very cool. Again, it's action movie. It feels right. The big long fight scenes, sometimes they do take place in one spot, but often there's motion, there's change. It keeps it interesting so that you aren't just watching, 2 guys shoot each other from behind car doors or slash at each other's swords. Yeah.
So 3 rounds and out, thumbs up. I'm great, because it is that simple of being like, great. And that's another thing to remember in terms of rage economy, and people worried about like, but I'm in Krenos and I have to spend willpower every round to keep it up if I haven't been killing somebody. I would point out 3 rounds and out. Like if you're in Krenos and you're kicking ass and you get through those 3 rounds and then you say, well, we're gonna wrap this up, you don't have to keep spending willpower. It's an excuse for you to be like, okay, well, we figured out what's going to happen, and you can move on, so that narratively you get to continue going on, and mechanically you're not beholden to keep doing things the way that it is. So, you are correct, by the way, Jan 3. Being in jail once all the properties are snapped up is the best thing to do.
It's kind of sadly comparable to real life.
Yep, basically.
You're rich, you got your assets, whatever. I guess I'm in jail for embezzling or whatever, but I'm still getting rich while I'm here, and I'll be out at some point to enjoy my wealth. Yep. Kick back, relax. Yeah, Monopoly was literally designed to tell you how terrible capitalism is. It sucks.
I like how this is the sad music part of the playlist. Works every time. Ellie Plus says, after diving deeper into the combat system and the rage economy, how are you advising your players to stat for combat? What do you think will be important to make a starting character able to handle initial combat encounters without feeling too weak? I told them, you're all going to be expected to fight. And that's all I said.
Yep. And, no one has 2 4s in any sort of combat combination, right? Like, no one is starting out as at least, dots can change, right? But at the moment, no one's such a monster, like a big fight powerhouse. And I didn't feel compelled that we needed someone to be that way. We'll see as we start playing how it actually falls, but I feel that as long as you have a few dice to roll, because it's 50-50 on the dice, I think that's a big part of it as well, because you only need to roll 6+ to win rather than 7+ in Exalted or the varying difficulty of 20th edition. I feel, as long as I have 2 or 3 dice, I'm going to at least get a success. Also, the ability to auto-win or to take half also is interesting. It means that, if I'm, in Krenos and I come across a mook, like a random, security guard who isn't armed, he's just standing there. I'm like, get out of my way, and he decides he wants to fight. It's just like, goodbye, right? I don't need to roll. He has like 2 dice. No. I have 8.
The game very specifically says that it's okay to take half even in combat situations because of that specifically.
Yeah.
We also still have our grace period, right? After 3 sessions, and even longer, honestly, if I'm being completely honest with you, within 3 sessions, you can change anything you want about your character you can unspend experience. You can change your distribution of dots just because sometimes you don't understand how something works. Even after that, if like you've bought a gift and then you realize you've never used it, and the reason why is because like it quite literally has never come up, or you just didn't understand it, I'm not going to be an asshole. I'm going to be like, great, pick a different gift. If it looks like my players are getting their asses kicked around the block all the time, and unfairly so, then we can talk about what it'll take. But also, experience is a thing. You know, it's not actually that expensive in early levels to go up from like 1 to 2 or from 2 to 3. So I don't think that that's necessarily going to be a huge problem. But if it is, we have safety nets.
Yeah, and no, I like starting as a new character and not being great. I love that climb. I don't generally enjoy being like, great, I'm going to have max. I'm going to have 10 dice and something at character creation. There's no journey there. And I think that, especially, you know, oh yeah, we kind of suck. And, you know, it's being a first level character in a video game. You know, you fight the slimes and the slimes hurt you. You know, 3 sessions later, you're going to look at the slime and laugh, right? They're going to walk up to you and you'll just ignore them because they don't hurt you at all. And I'm okay with that climb. It's part of the fun of growing as a character.
Spot asks, with the Guru Nation shattered, my understanding is that W5 leaves it more up to the storyteller to decide what Guru politics and interactions and conflicts between Guru looks like in their campaign. Do I have any thoughts on how I'll approach it? I asked people today, actually, hey, so are there things that you definitely want to see in this chronicle? Things that you definitely don't want to see in this chronicle? Because that's what a session 0 is. And I will continually adjust as need be. But that's kind of what I would anticipate. The thing is, I'm coming from a position of werewolf knowledge. My players are not. So if I bring up a lot of shit about the old Guru Nation, that's what I would consider deep background. It's not something that I'm going to require my players to know, and in fact, they can choose to ignore it if they want, because I'm not going to throw them in a situation where I'm like, no, the Guru Nation still exists, because it doesn't. I will definitely have characters who will be traditionalist, and I will have characters who will be radical, and we'll see where the players fall on that spectrum, because I'm not even sure that they know.
Yep.
MyFlow asks, one thought I have had after digesting the book a bit is that you're heavily encouraged to go claws and fangs as a combat strategy. I can't say that I recall much in terms of gifts dedicated to using ranged weapons or going melee, and those that can be used in that way are usually perfectly compatible with claws and bites, while using natural weapons gives many options. My question is, how viable does combat strategies that aren't just biting and slashing with claws look in W5? It seems to me that being a baseball batting, gun-toting killing machine is very suboptimal compared to just investing in brawl and going ham with gifts and or Krynos. I'm going to turn to you first because I'm curious what you think.
So first off, as we've discussed earlier, is that Krynos, it is your most powerful form, but you can't maintain it for long. So that isn't the only answer to combat, even with 3 rounds and out, because it costs you willpower unless you're killing people every round, in which case if you're killing people every round, maybe you should just be taking the auto win and you don't need to be rolling combat at all.
And remember that you drop to Rage 1 after you leave Krynos.
Yeah, so that's also, there's a cost to going up to it. So against that. And I think that you do get the +2 or +4 to physical tests from those forms. But as we were negotiating, because it's a minor action to change form, that first round, you kind of offset all or part of that bonus. So there's that cost to examine, and it's also just setting dependent. If your whole campaign is Guru versus Guru, you probably will be claws and fangs a lot of the time. But if you're in an urban or a rural setting where there will be humans to deal with, then you probably want something that isn't, maybe you will just slug people because that's, the optimal dot arrangement to just always only do brawl. But if you care about doing something interesting, if you are interested in, having some variability, then definitely firearms for ranged contexts, because you can't ranged in any form. And, melee, like at the moment, spoilers for Session 0, I'm looking at maybe carrying a switchblade of some sort. So, yeah, sure, that's suboptimal to be spreading my dots out, but I just think that flavor-wise, I don't think that my character is going to be a slugfest kind of person when they aren't in form. And that's, yeah.
So there is a Black Fury gift. It is called, I'm just going to call it up here, Wasp Talons. Now, Wasp Talons is a 6 renown, so you have to, it's not for starting. And the Guru can fire their claws like darts, inflicting damage on a faraway foe. Now, this is to be highlighting the fact that werewolves, who are claws and fangs, suck at range. They suck at range.
Yeah.
They are not designed to do combat in range with their gifts for the most part. This is a gift that is an advanced gift, which literally just gives you the option of being able to attack with your claws at range, which is cool, but that's a significant thing. I think that for firearms, because firearms also firearms can also count for things like archery. I think that there will be times where you will not want to approach your opponent. What if your opponent is standing in the middle of a plasma fire? For some Banes, this is completely possible. You approach that person and you attack them, great, but your skin's gonna melt off.
Yeah.
And sure, a Guru can handle that better than most, but your skin's gonna melt off.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a gun, then you can still shoot at it from a safer distance.
Yeah.
What happens if you're in a situation where you desperately don't want anybody to know that you're a shapeshifter? Delirium does matter, but it's not always foolproof. And what if there are spirits or Banes about who may not necessarily know that you are Guru? Well, maybe it's a good idea for you to have a weapon.
Yeah.
If you're in Hamid, having a weapon in this game is really useful because weapons are automatic damage. They don't change your pool to roll, they change how much damage you do, and it is automatic.
Yeah.
It is not I get to roll some more dice and then on average, I guess I'll do a bit more.
Yeah.
You have a weapon that does +2 damage. That means that every time you successfully hit somebody, you're doing +2 damage. That's fantastic.
That's exactly. For Switchblade, it's 2. Like, that's huge. That's equivalent to, almost equivalent to Krynos Claws. Yeah.
If you're in Krynos, you get a +3 claw attack.
Yeah.
Which is really good.
Yeah.
It's basically at the level of the top weapons that you can get. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But Krynos is not a form that you can stay in forever. There are risks entering and leaving it, and that's okay, but you're not gonna have the same risks. You'll have different ones if you're carrying a sword, right? So I genuinely believe that some of this is narrative, in that, like, if your character is comfortable using a weapon, maybe they'll use a weapon because they don't always want to pop claws, but I think some of it's also born into the mechanics. Give a system, a setting, or give a system of mechanics to a player, and there will be players who inevitably will figure out what the most optimal choice is. They'll know for sure. Okay, that's great, but I could do the same in D&D. Why would anybody want to play a monk?
Yeah, well, because monks were OP in 3.5. I don't know how OP they are now.
In 5th edition, for the longest time, monks were awful.
Yeah.
I think they've changed it since, but monks were just straight up bad.
Yeah.
And at the same time, people will still play them.
Yeah.
If your game is going to be like, I really want to focus on what's going to be the most optimal solution for me, cool, go brawl. If you think that that's what's, because I'll tell you as a storyteller, if all my players just invested in brawl all day, every day, I know how to counter that.
Yeah.
Everything is a counter.
Yeah, like, okay, you're in an urban setting, well, you get in trouble with the police force and they're just gonna shoot you from really far away. Yeah, sure, try to close the distance, but they've got you surrounded. So any direction you run, there's people shooting you from another direction, right? Like, there are so many things that you can do if you don't diversify. For sure.
Flower of August, that's a really interesting question.
Yep.
And I will answer it for you. Because do werewolves take half damage from knives and stuff in Werewolf 5th or full damage? Half. It's considered superficial. The only things that do aggravated damage, well, not the only things, but generally the things that do aggravated damage to Guru are silver, fire, and some supernatural weapons like bites. Bites do aggravated damage in Werewolf, for instance. Claws don't even do, though that's superficial.
But unless specifically listed, superficial is always halved.
Yeah.
So I think that means there's probably like some gifts or some weapons or whatever. They're like, this does superficial, but you don't have it. Sure. But I think in most cases through the book, my guess would be that for simplification, they just make sure that it does 8 damage, which will get reduced to 4. But it splatters humans.
Yeah. Humans are not the same way. Things that might be superficial to a werewolf or a vampire or certain spirits or whatever, a human, it might be aggravated damage. Claw a human and they're probably going to, go down. So that is important to keep in mind. So I'm going to go here with one from Elizabeth. Would love to hear your take on Rites. Having never played Werewolf before, I'm curious how we can integrate Rites into the campaign in an interesting way without breaking narrative flow. A very good question. One of the best parts about LARPing Werewolf was that you got to do Rites. One of the worst parts about LARPing Werewolf is that sometimes you had to do a fucking rite. Rites are really interesting tools, but they are tools to tell a story, and not all tools are applicable at all times. If it's the first time that you're doing a rite, it might be worth it to describe it. And depending on how important that rite is, you can spend more or less time. A rite of dedication, we're definitely not going to play that out every single time that somebody has to dedicate clothes.
I've decided it's autumn. I now want to have a sweater dedicated to me. Cool, you do it. You don't have to goddamn play out, carefully folding your clothes and stacking them in a specific. You can wear a sweater. It's good. Okay, next. Yeah.
There are also circumstances under which I would say that maybe the entire session may be devoted to a rite. If it's like a rite of cairn building, that's a significant event and it might be really cool. Do you have a player who's really interested in coming up with a way to present a rite? Maybe that would be awesome too. So the key that I would say is, does it seem like it would be fun? And does it seem like it would be fun for everyone at the table? If the answer is no to the first, it won't be fun to do this, then don't do it. Just say that the rite takes place, roll if it requires a roll, and move on. Is it going to be fun for everybody at the table? Absolutely, then go ahead and do it, because then everyone's going to have fun. But let's say that the answer is it's going to be fun for some and less fun for others. You gotta balance that out.
Yeah.
In much the same way that if combat is fun for 2 of your players and it's not fun for 2 of your players, you don't want to say, well, we won't do combat at all, but you might not want to spend the entire session doing combat day after day after day.
Yeah.
Same thing for Rites.
Yeah, it's sharing the spotlight, right? Sometimes, you have one character that is much more interested in Rites, so you make sure that you do occasionally spend the time on it, even if the other characters, are standing in the sidelines. But you just make sure that you give those characters a moment to shine in what they're interested in as well.
Is there 3 rounds and out for Rites as well? Not really, because Rites tend to be a single roll. Right at the session recap. Oh shit. Is that going to be a thing? Oh shit. That might be a thing.
Maybe.
But I will say that if you are, if you're looking at the Rites, some of the Rites are strictly narrative. A Gathering for the Departed, for instance, doesn't have any mechanics associated with it. You can definitely add some if you wanted, like it helps appease the spirits in the area. It helps, people deal with roles for potential Harno or Hoglosk. You could do those things. But A Gathering for the Departed is probably something that you would want to play out because you are memorializing somebody that you've lost. At the same time, if it's not somebody who your characters cared about, and they don't care about any of the NPCs associated with it, but you walk in and they're doing a gathering for the departed, you can just sum it up. It's just like any other role-playing scene.
We respectfully participate, but we don't take any forward participation because this is someone that we didn't know. We do that. Okay, at the end, after everyone's had a moment to feel their grief, we move on, and okay, anyway, can we borrow your super duper spirit tool?
Kung Fu Friends, you say, I kind of like that, but I'm not sure in what context
which you're responding to.
What do you like?
What do you like?
What
do you like anything? No, sorry. That's just...
Ardric says, how do you plan to handle learning gifts? Will you run a scene for each one, since we have to seek out and make a pact with specific spirits? So I've already spoken with players. The idea that I presented to them is some things may involve a scene in-game, right? Depending on the spirit, depending on the reason for doing it, especially if there's a specific reason why it might not be easy to get, right? If, let's say that you have very specifically wronged the kangaroo spirit in your area, and then you want to buy a Hare's Leap, and kangaroo is the only spirit around, I might say like, well, shit, you're gonna have to play that shit out on stream because that's gonna be interesting because kangaroo's pissed at you. But the other thing that I've said is that if you're planning on buying a rite, or sorry, not a rite, if you're planning on buying a gift, there will be a channel on our Discord where players will be able to play out getting and appeasing the spirit for their gift. So we will be able to see how much fun that will be for people. And it could be simply just like 2 sentences on each side and we, nod, shake hands, and we move forward. But there may also be times where a spirit will be like, I will agree to teach you this gift, but... And then we'll figure out what that means.
Yeah.
If the answer is something that's really going to involve that one character and it's only interesting for that character, we probably won't play it on stream. But that might still be a really cool scene that will be played out that people can read and you can use your emoji to react to and all of that.
Yeah.
Because I do think that that's an interesting part of the game, and I don't want to take away also from interacting with spirits. What if we have a theurge in the game, right? We don't want to make the theurge kind of be like, we'll always hand wave your part of the game.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
No good.
Yeah, and I think my general advice would be specifically that feel out what feels good for your team. I know that we specifically, we don't do things like blue booking where you have to write paragraphs to justify something. We want it to be fun. We want it to be interesting. Specifically, write a little bit, but you don't have to write, 500 words or something, right? We don't want it to be work. We want it to be fun. I think that's what it comes down to.
And if it starts feeling like work, we'll stop.
Yeah.
When I was running Immortal Vigilance's Werewolf section, so that was the online game that I ran for quite some time, one of the things that I was trying to do, and then inevitably this is part of the reason why I ended up leading the team, was I wanted to stop the ridiculous blue book requirements that were being asked. This was before I joined the team, because I joined the team and then I became head storyteller afterwards. But I despised the fact that on the site, there was like a word count that you had to reach before you could consider yourself justified to make any experience purchase at all. And I hated that because it felt like homework. And homework is not fun.
It's not fun for the players or for the storytellers.
Yeah.
God, especially I can't imagine in a situation like that, some people are going to be okay writers, some people are going to be terrible writers, or they won't know what punctuation is or line breaks are, and then you're stuck reading 1,000 words that you have to try to decipher, or you're just like, great, that's long, boop.
Yeah.
So why did they bother writing it?
I had to read a lot of crappy fiction.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, exactly. If it's literally going to be like, I'm not going to bother reading this, I just wanted to make sure that you put in the time, then that's really fucking stupid.
It's not your fucking job. Do better things with your life.
So, in this case, if it's a scene that I think will be genuinely interesting for us to play out, we'll do it. If it's a scene that will be interesting for us and it will be interesting for the audience, then we'll do it on the Discord or we'll do it live on the stream. But if it's not interesting, we won't. I think it also depends on on the matter of day to day, right? In much the same way that I'm not going to say, okay, well, we'll have to write up a training montage when you wanted to move from Brawl 2 to Brawl 3. It's probably not that interesting because it just means I'm going to learn. But it might be interesting if in-game you justify the fact that you bought up Brawl to yourself as a player by saying, I've been spending a lot of time with that, like that Galliard who keeps kicking around the Sept, who seems to know a suspicious amount of how to fight, despite the fact that, like they keep claiming that they're a pacifist or whatever. That's a really bad example. Werewolves aren't pacifists, but and they learn Kailindo. Oh God, Kailindo is the martial art, the shape-shifting martial, whatever. So yeah, it's gonna come down to fun. If it's fun, great. Banned. I don't blame you, Kung Fu Fenris.
Yeah. This question specifically is why I'm scrolling through the book. I'm just like, I definitely wasn't paying that much attention when I was choosing my gifts.
Jumping onto the question of learning gifts from spirits, some gifts are taught by much rarer spirits than others, even those available to starting characters. How would that sort of spirit availability impact a game? Kind of depends, right? I think that the rarity of a spirit also can match directly with how much I want to control whether you can buy it or not. Because if I want to make it easy, there's always like, yeah, you ask around the Sept, hey, how can I find specifically an avatar of Gorgon, right? Well, you're gonna have to find a Black Fury. A Black Fury might know better. Black Fury is like, okay, well, yeah, I know that Gorgon doesn't really hang around here that much, but head to Philadelphia. And then I make it easy. Like, great, okay, so you go to Philadelphia, you find that avatar of Gorgon, you do some proper shimonage, great, you get the gift. But I can also make it tough. I don't want you to have Gorgon's visage. You can't find Gorgon anywhere. There's no Black Furies around for you to ask. Oh, fuck. It's up to me. Rarity is always a function of storyteller's decision. And if I think that there's a reason that I want my players to struggle to get something because I think it will make a better story, great, I'll do that. And if I don't want my players to do something, I'll tell them straight up. I'll be like, I don't want you to buy that. Fuck you. And then it's a negotiation because I don't think storytellers should be able to just unilaterally decide.
Yeah.
Like, hey, this thing that you've been looking forward to buying for the past 8 sessions and you've been stockpiling your XP for, nah. Like, that's also super bad, so.
Well, it's also like, if you live in Australia and you've set your game in Australia, does that mean there are certain things that you can't do? If you set yours in PEI, you can't apparently connect with any spirit that's bigger than a rabbit because there are no deer or moose or any large animals on the island of PEI. Too bad. Like, that's not fun. So it's definitely, I think, your approach of what's interesting. Yeah. I'm just thinking over the basic ones, right? Like the everyone gets.
So it does say here, spirits grant and enact all gifts, and receiving a gift from a particularly hard to find or recalcitrant spirit might be its own scene or even story. For more on learning new abilities, experience, and character growth, directs you to another page. So that basically means, hey, if it's going to be, if you want to make it difficult, you can make it difficult, and you don't have to.
Well, I like that, for example, Tongue of the Beast, which is renown 7, so it's pretty far in, but it's a lion or moose grants it. It's like, oh, well, we have moose here, but you'd have to go like the likelihood of a lion. I know spirits are different and they can basically be anywhere, but yeah.
It also says on page 145, troops should feel free to vary the spirits involved from more local spirits if the flora, fauna, and other spiritscape residents would suggest it. For example, a capybara spirit might teach and perform the gift Open Seal in South America and the Umbra there rather than a raccoon spirit. Yeah, around here, raccoons.
You can find them.
We have a bunch of them. But we don't really have any capybaras. It's not really a thing. So the game basically gives you the levers to pull. Yeah, it doesn't have to be geographically locked either. It's true. You can have a relic to cover that ground. The last thing that I think we were going to do, unless there's other questions that we wanted to cover, Ellie Spot asks this: can you do clinic hours with Kate?
Check.
And do a demo combat, or even a couple, changing the amount of resources available at the start, just to get a feel for what a turn looks like and the decisions that need to be made. I know combat easily gets lengthy during play, but if you had a simple scenario prepped and some moves determined in advance, maybe the process can be streamlined enough to highlight the combat rules and what the rules look like in play. Thankfully, it doesn't actually have to be that complicated.
Yeah.
We only have 15 minutes left in the stream, and I guarantee you we can get through a combat real quick. You have a character in front of you?
I can make one up.
Okay, great. You have a character. Let's say that this combat is going to be pretty simple.
Yep.
You're in an alleyway. There is a mugger in the alleyway who's stolen a purse, and inside that purse, which wasn't your purse, but it was someone's, inside that purse you know that there's evidence that you need in order to implicate someone else elsewhere in the chronicle. So you're gonna have to go after this mugger, but the mugger pulls out a switchblade.
Da da da.
Does not want to yield this purse to you. Let's assume that you're only going to deal with this with combat.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to also have a switchblade.
Great. Let's say that this scene you're going to start with Rage 2.
Great.
Initiative is not a thing in Werewolf 5th edition, so we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
You and I are
Where's
going
my
to
cheat sheet?
basically
Yeah.
try to slash at each other
Yeah.
then? Great. So you're going to roll your, let's say, strength melee,
Yeah.
and I'm going to roll my strength melee.
Great.
Go for it.
That is 3 successes for me. No brutal outcome. No loss of rage.
Great.
Not right. There wouldn't be loss of rage.
I rolled only 2 successes.
So I win. So I get a margin of 1.
Yep.
And then plus 2 for my switchblade. I deal 3 damage.
I take 3 damage.
It's superficial because it's not egg. Slash.
But no, it's aggravated to a human.
Okay.
We'll say
I'll double check that.
it depends on the kind of blade and how you're doing it.
Cool.
But the human takes 3 damage. But
Give that back.
so that's a round of combat. We can do it again, but let's make it slightly more difficult. Why don't you change your form on the same turn that you're rolling your next attack?
Yeah.
Because you're in Hobbit.
Yeah, great. Give that back, and then I hear people approaching, and I want to end this fast. All right. I'm going to go up to Glabro, so that's going to be a rage check. 1 rage check.
So roll that rage check.
That is a 5. I fail.
Failing the rage check doesn't mean that the shape shifting doesn't happen. It does mean
I'm
that
down
your
to 1 rage.
goes down from 2
So
to 1.
I had 2, now I'm down to 1. Great. And then instead of my knife, I just ditch that.
No, you can still use your knife in
Yeah,
Glabro.
but I feel like I really want this to be over fast. So I'm gonna Glabro physical test plus 2 dice, but I lose the 2 dice because I've switched into
Glabro this round.
Glabro. So basically it's neutralized.
Yeah, so you might as well keep the knife.
Okay, then I may as well keep the knife. So I will roll the same pool.
You go down in rage before the roll for combat,
Yeah.
Flower of August.
Yeah,
Because you shift before you
yeah,
roll.
yeah. So
Normally
I
I'd be rolling at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
We just don't have room on the
Great,
desk.
I have a roll result that is totally simultaneous with yours. Oh, I rolled a
Oh,
1.
I'm only supposed to roll 3 dice.
Oh,
This character roll. Not that strong. Okay.
we both rolled 1 success.
Okay. In the event of a tie, it means that we both succeed with a margin of 1,
Yeah.
which means that we will both do damage. I have a margin of 1, so I'll do 1. Plus I'm wielding a switchblade. That's a 2 damage weapon, so I do 3 damage. However, it's to a werewolf, so that's halved round up.
2
You'll take
damage.
2.
Oh, and I also do 3.
You'll do 3 to me. Now, the fact that my health is probably, down by 6 at this point, for a human, that's pretty likely that I've taken it down, because I'd have to have stamina 4 to have health levels left. But let's say, for the purposes of this, that I'm still going.
Okay.
Now you're in Glabro, and you can roll your attack.
Yeah. All right, let's finish this. So I have 1 rage. I'm already in
Nope,
Glabro.
you have 2. You've been damaged in combat and your rage went up.
Thank you. I'm gonna have to get used to that. So yeah, I've got these dice for rage and these other dice for everything else. So I'm
you
now
had
up
a
to
pool
2
of 4.
rage. I had a pool of 4, but because I'm in Glabro, I add 2 more dice. Woo, I'm up to 6.
Go for it.
I'm rolling at the same time as you, totally. So I get that many successes, and you who are also rolling at the same time as me, I'll go get that.
I rolled 1 success. How
I
many did
rolled
you roll?
4.
That means that the margin is 3. 3 plus 2, 5. 5 damage.
You're probably done, though.
Yeah, health only matters once your track is filled is correct, Flower of August. It's just that because it's dependent on whether it's aggravated or superficial damage. Because if it's full of aggravated damage, you're dead. If you're full of superficial damage, you...
Yeah, but it's
take
specifically
a
whether or not
penalty.
there are wound penalties. There aren't. Until you're super hurt, until you're at max.
Yeah. So we've rolled 3 rounds of combat.
I mean, I've splattered this guy.
You've definitely splattered this guy, but let's say that this mugger had like 2 people who were behind, who were like flicking their knives and being like, yeah, we'll take her on afterwards. Well, we've done 3 rounds of combat. Are you done with combat or do you want to keep going?
I'm good.
I'm kind of good on combat.
Yeah.
So why don't we decide, look, you absolutely splattered this dude.
I got the bag.
The other 2 are going to surrender.
Yeah.
And they're going to try to just turn and flee. They're letting you have the bag. They're not going to interfere. Does that sound okay for you?
Yeah, I can't think of something witty to call after them, so yeah.
Okay.
And stay back. I don't know, some dumb shit like that.
And
Meh.
that's 3 rounds and out.
Yeah.
We're not going to continue the combat, even though there are ostensibly other combatants in the area, because it's just not that easy. It's just not that fun at this point. We've already established the direction that this combat is going, so done. And that, quite literally, it can get more complicated. We didn't add like gifts to this, but we did involve a shift. It is relatively simple compared to, say, World of Darkness 20th anniversary. So Werewolf 20, we would have to roll attack,
I attack.
roll defense,
Defend.
roll
Damage.
roll soak,
Soak.
and then we would figure out how much damage was truly done. And here, it's 2 rolls, they're made simultaneously. And we also, it's not, that's her attack, and then I roll my attack, which would be 8 rolls.
Yeah.
And instead, it's 2 rolls, which can be done at the same time, and then it figures out which one of us is going to do the damage or not.
Yeah.
You better be glad, bro. I'm letting you grow. Get out of here.
Yeah. Pew, 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 pew. Back down to human. Nice. Nice, Liz.
Ties is both at 1. That's correct,
Yeah.
Requiem Lost. So Flower of August, you're right. The thing is, initiative, like, you don't roll initiative in this. Like, it's basically the ranged attacks happen first, then the melee happens, and then,
Yeah, no, the order is, so PCs declare first, then NPCs, when you're setting things up. Then you deal with existing close combat, then existing ranged combat, then new physical combat, then anything else, if it matters. That's just a way for you to go around the table in an order. So basically, like, if we're already fighting and then Liz's character shows up on the scene and wants to, like, take a shot at the guy, it would be ours first, then her. She wouldn't shoot first.
Yeah. It's made streamlined that way. I kind of think that is good. And there are a couple of extra permutations, like, what do you roll in defense if more than one person is attacking you? What do you roll in defense if you're not attacking the person who is attacking you?
Yeah.
And yes, it can get a little more complicated than that, but not by that much. And very specifically, the combat moves quick. And yes, you can use gifts, but you can only ever use 1 gift a turn. So the most complicated that you can get might be, for instance, I'm going to shift, I'm going to use a gift, and then I'm going to roll. It's definitely not going to be terrible in that way. So armor, Requiem Lost, takes aggravated damage and turns it into superficial damage. It downgrades damage, and the level of armor you have is how many points per turn it can do that.
You have 2 points of armor. You get
Or
2
per attack, I think.
Yeah, you get 2 egg. Oh, it's 2 superficial. You get 4 egg. It's 2 egg, 2 superficial.
Yeah. So that's armor.
Yeah.
Your health is determined by your stamina.
Yep.
So if you
Stamina
have more
plus
stamina,
3.
you have more health. I think it's 3.
Yeah, stamina plus 3.
Plus your stamina is how many health levels you have. And that's it.
Yep.
Point final. Your willpower is your composure plus your resolve. And that's how much willpower you have. If your stamina goes up in the course of the game, you will get more health. If your composure goes up, you'll get more willpower. Yes. Superficial damage is halved, I think, specifically for
Supernatural
supernaturals,
beings.
not
Humans. No.
normal humans.
No.
I will check. I'll remind people, look, I've read the book. A lot of this is different, and I may also remember things from old versions and assume that they were new. I'm not. You should not consider me an expert on this system at this point. I have read it. I'm a game designer by trade, but I'll get things wrong, and it's just
Well, also there are a few times where they explain like the default and the exceptions at the front of like the chapter, and then they kind of ignore specifying throughout the rest of the chapter, and then you kind of, that specificity has left your brain.
The question is superficial damage halved for mortals? Kung Fu Fenris. And
That's
I believe
true.
the answer is it's not.
Yeah.
Superficial is always halved even for mortals? Oh, okay.
Huh.
But the catch is that's it. The catch is what's considered superficial versus aggravated.
Yeah.
So like a knife isn't aggravated damage to a werewolf, but it might be aggravated damage to a human. A shotgun blast might not be aggravated damage to you, but it might be to a human. So that's where it ends up. But if you punch somebody,
Okay.
then that's not aggravated damage. Yeah, like Kung Fu Fender says, mortals
So,
take egg from almost everything.
Like, okay, technically, like, my knife deals +2. If it was superficial, you'd only take 1. But since you're a human, it's egg. So not only are you taking the +2, it's also egg. So it's real bad.
Yeah, it's more likely to kill you. But superficial might be like if you're beating somebody with a baseball bat, that you might say is superficial damage.
Yeah, you're trying to club the guy over the head so he knocks out. It's superficial.
Yeah. You're punching somebody, superficial. You're clawing somebody, that's probably egg to a mortal. Humans are really freaking hurt by getting stabbed in the guts. Ellie Spot,
Yeah.
how many years of medical training did you need to figure that one out?
Yeah.
Baseball bat is still very much lethal. Oh, it might be in this game, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the trick. And that's probably the thing that I'm going to have the most struggle with when it comes to W5, is figuring out what does egg and what doesn't and when.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm writing down right now. It's like on my character sheet, whatever weapons I have is like weapon dealing egg versus superficial, depending on target. No, don't switch to French.
Someone spends their entire night shift packing their abdominal cavity with gauze. Yeah. Yeah, when the W5 book calls out something as aggravated damage, it's referring to werewolves or other supernatural creatures with enhanced damage resistance. Yeah. Makes sense. Werewolves, ag is silver and fire and other very specific things that say that they deal aggravated
possibly
damage to werewolves.
gifts. Yeah. Bites.
Certain abilities by certain spirits or banes may be able to do that, but
Dad jokes. Oh, so much egg. Yeah.
Remember that you can also take damage to your willpower track as well. That's mental damage. Somebody makes a particularly cutting remark against you, you may take willpower damage. And that can be superficial and it can be aggravated. Superficial damage is normal people. Aggravated damage might come from like a close friend betraying you. Or if your
I assume there
willpower,
are some gifts that might do it.
if your willpower has already filled up with superficial, then remember any other damage at that point will become aggravated. Aggravated willpower is really tough to ditch. It's not impossible, but it is tough. That's aggravating damage. Low, that's like basically my favorite comment today.
As a response to dad jokes are aggravating damage.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a dad joke in and of itself.
It's not kind of, it is a dad joke.
Which is why I'm like...
I hope that you've enjoyed our little extra dive into Werewolf. We may do, who knows, after playing a bunch of this, maybe we'll end up having to do some more. But what we can tell you is that there is more to come. When's that going to be?
Yeah, we're doing our session 0 type thing. We have already discussed offline, but that'll be this coming Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. That's our usual Sunday stream time. And then episode 1 will be the week after. So stay tuned to witness this game in action. We'll be putting it up on podcast and YouTube that night. So it'll be there for your viewing pleasure. As always, check out our Discord for the details as to the happenings. Possibly if we come up with our Chronicle name before we start, you might get a sneak peek at that. There will be streams throughout the week. Stay tuned to our Discord and socials for the exact details. But one thing you folks can do is if you're excited and you're in communities that are also excited about this, that want to see the game in action, let them know. That would be really fantastic for us, and hopefully it would be fantastic for people that want to see the game happen.
Game's a lot more fun for the audience when there's a lot of audience, because then they get to talk about it, either during the game or afterwards in our Discord server or wherever the hell else you talk about it that we can't see, because we can't control your minds. But it does make a huge difference, and we would really appreciate it if you would push. We're actually going to start asking about this on Discord as well. It's up to you to help us reach new people who might be interested in coming in to see how we choose to play Werewolf. Not necessarily the way to play Werewolf, but it will be ours, and that's what we will do for us. There may also be other streams throughout the week. You can look to see whether that will happen with Scott, Elizabeth, me, Kate. But the best place to figure that out is on our Discord. So go and have a look there. Otherwise, I mean, look, if you're playing in a role-playing game, things aren't going the way that you would have expected, you're not having fun, and you don't know what to do about it, there is one thing that we can tell you can always do that might be tough, but it's generally going to give you the best outcome. And that is?
Use your word hole. Whether that's actually verbally speaking to a person or typing a message to them. Communicate. Use your words in your communication. And we also encourage you to have safety tools at your table. Communicate your needs, whether you use our play pause stop cards, whether you use the X card, whether you just make sure that everyone at the table is always okay for someone to say, wait, I need to talk about it. Communicate. Communication is key.
I should have communicated that this was supposed to be a swift button to end.
I know, but
it's important
tools.
enough.
Yep.
See you next time.
Bye. I knew it was supposed to be a swift button to end, but
Doesn't matter. It's fine.
It was just like, ka-cha.